Again, there's a couple of key points I want to make. First and foremost, my job here is to make your job easier. I want to limit as much of the kind of tedious maintenance work that you typically have to do, and allow our technology to really run with that and accomplish as much as possible. And one of those things that we want to offer is setting up the meets for yourself. I believe there are a couple of folks in here that have attempted to set up meets already. And that is perfectly fine. And you absolutely are at liberty to do that. And we can dig into exactly the ins and outs of that. One issue I'm seeing currently that might be affecting you in creating a meet is that our database of venues and locations in British Columbia is naturally at this point very slim. So when you're going to set up a meet, a lot of times you will not find that designated venue that you want to select, that location of the meet already in our system. And that can be a stopgap temporarily. So one thing I'd like to say is you can circumvent that by just putting any location in British Columbia. That way it will add it to the calendar appropriately. And then you can reach out to me to create that venue and I'll get your meet updated. But more importantly, you can send us the meet and we will do it for you. And then we will email you a link to it. When we do that, when we create a meet for you, you will still have full access to manage the meet and view all the registration data, to change any settings, any kind of entry limits, registration open and close dates, all of that typical stuff you would need to do to kind of manage and maintain registration for a particular meet. So by us doing the dirty work of just setting it up, you are not going to be limited at all in your ability to take care of things. It is just simply a service we like to offer, especially in these inaugural seasons, where you are naturally not going to be an expert on MileSplit, and the learning curve comes with hurdles, right? Using a new platform, a new software is always a learning curve. And we like to limit that as much as possible so you can focus on the things that matter, your jobs, the athletes, your families, living, a comfortable work-life balance, right? So I figured, well, and I'm sorry, let me add one other key point. Anybody on this call that does not already have a MileSplit account set up, you can do so by going to bc.milesplit.com/register. That will allow you to create an account. And one important thing I like to remind everybody on this call, our registration platform is entirely free of charge. There are no additional benefits from a paid subscription as it pertains to registration, both for the coaches, for the timers, and the meet directors. A paid subscription will unlock premium content, live stream footage of races if we have somebody on site filming it, as well as archived videos of the meets and that sort of thing. But as it pertains to actually setting up registration and hosting meets and allowing coaches to sign their athletes up for said meets, you do not need a paid subscription, and you never will. So if anybody signed up for a paid subscription and does not want one, please reach out to me individually, and we can issue a refund on those, unless, of course, you signed up for one and you decide you do want to keep the paid subscription. We do not want to charge anybody that does not actually desire that premium content, is simply using our system as a registration platform. So one thing we can start on is I'm going to assume that we have already set up and created a meet, and we can pretend these are the zone meets, the provincials, that we will set up on your behalf to ensure that everything is consistent and that everything is set up properly for the coaches to register. And we can amend that as needed. Harp and I have been in a lot of conversation making sure that we've got the right event lists and the right classifications and divisions set up for what those meets will be like. Those sort of meets, the zones specifically, I do ask, let me set those up on your behalf. You can submit the meet through the form that we have shared with BCSS, or you can email me directly. And we will get those set up and send you a link so you can specifically share that with the teams that are attending your meet. So let's assume that your meet has already been set up, whether you did it on your own or through us. The key thing you are going to see here as a meet director and or a timer is you should have a gray meet manager button here. And what this meet manager button does is allows you into like the back end, the admin side of registration. And it is limited to people with specific access for this meet. And there's a bit of a tiered system here. First, we have timers. If you're a timing company, if we create one for you and assign you to the meet, you will have access to it, as well as a coach from the host team will have access to Meet Manager as well. And then any meet director that needs access to a particular meet and maybe isn't affiliated with a timing company or the host team, we will grant you access as well individually. And we can work through all of that to ensure you all have the proper access. If there's ever a meet that is already on the calendar and you do not have this Meet Manager button, again, feel free to reach out to me and I will get your account set up with that proper access level. The big kicker is that you already have an existing MileSplit account, and then I can upgrade your account to be able to access the meets that you need to be able to access. So you can see on this page, this is kind of the landing page, and it is very basic and bare bones at this moment for the sake of registration. On this page here, where you see this meet information, anything you want to post to the meet, whether it is written instructions, copy and pasted, or attachments, will appear here on this front page of the meet. And I can very quickly show you precisely what that's going to look like. When we come here, and you can see here below this page break that you'll see any text that you've added. If you add an attachment, it will appear as a hyperlink that they can click on and it will download the file. But potentially even more important is this link right here. This is an online registration instructions, same instructions we've shared with BCSS, who have now shared with the coaches, and the same instructions I went through on the webinars with the coaches. It will take folks directly to our support site where they can watch videos and see written instructions with screenshots on how to register for the meet. So as a meet director and a timer, if you are being directed questions about registration, whether they're running into issues or they don't believe they have the right process, a good place to start is these instructions. And then the next step in the approach is to direct them to me. And whether you send me the email with the relevant information or you send them directly to me, either way is fine. We'll get them taken care of. Again, I do not expect anybody here to become subject matter experts on all things MileSplit in the first season of using MileSplit. That will come in time.
Jeffrey, sorry, will that online registration instructions be on everyone's meet information homepage?
It is.
It'll already be there?
Okay. Great question. This is automatically tagged to every single meet that we set up. So it will be there. No additional, nothing additional is needed from you or on the MileSplit end to get that added. It's a sticky link that will direct people to our support site from every meet. They can also access the support site while they're actually going through registration themselves. So we try to keep it present so they can always find their way to the support site if needed. In addition to myself personally and the support repository, we also have a dedicated customer support team that can be reached at registration@milesplit.com. You don't need to memorize that. If they scroll down to the Contact Us button, they'll be able to fill out a form with all the information, and it will email that same registration@milesplit.com email address. So they can email us directly. They can go to the Contact Us. They've got the support knowledge base, and then they've also got me as a resource as well. You can also see here on this meet page some of the basic information. This meet closes in 2 days. The date is right here. Once we get in within a day, it will actually start a countdown, 23 hours and 52 minutes, so on and so forth. Location is here, and were we to have a host team listed and or a timer, that information would live here as well, so they can see it. A really neat feature that we're going to be able to do for these zone meets and for the championships is we can attach historical data to it, so they could come here and look at the meets from the past. This meet history is a little sporadic because it's just meet history tied to a training meet that I've set up throughout the years. And they can see that when the meet is over and results have been posted, they do not need to go to a different page. They can still access those results from the same link they went to register. Once the meet is completed and results have been posted, this results tab will actually be the default. So when they go to it, it will no longer show them the meet information, but rather it will show them the actual results from the meet. If we haven't processed those into our database, they'll show as the actual text file that has been submitted. And then once we have actually processed the results, they'll be formatted where you can click on an athlete name, go to their profile. You could click on the team name and go to the team page in a much more interactive experience. Likewise, the teams tab here is entirely informational. This is public facing. So teams can go here and see all the other teams that have already signed up for this meet. And likewise, if you opt to make entries public before registration closes, they'll be able to go here and actually see the other athletes that are currently signed up for this meet. One thing I will add on the entries, we give you the ability to decide when those entries go public. You have the option of making them public always. So as soon as registration opens and people begin registering for the meet, entries are public. We have an option to only make entries public after registration closes, which a lot of folks like because it eliminates a little bit of the gamemanship of being able to look at other entries and adjusting your own based on that. And then we have an option to never make the entries public if you've got rules and regulations that do not publicize that information at all. And we can amend that however you need that done. Again, this is all public facing information. This is accessible by you all on this call, but more importantly for the coaches and the athletes that are actually coming to this meet. Where the experience begins to differ for you all versus a standard coach is once again this gray meet manager button. To most users, all they're going to see here is the green register online now button. If registration hasn't opened yet, it'll be yellow and indicate that registration opens soon. And then likewise, if it is closed, it will be a red button indicating registration is closed. For us on this call, we can click on this Meet Manager button, and you can see where you have a lot of options to edit settings as well as view data. Right off the bat, in the header box, you can see the number of teams that have been entered. Teams scheduled here would be teams that have been either invited or added the meet to their calendar, but have not actively begun registration yet. And total teams is the combination. So this teams entered means every team that was scheduled or invited has already begun registration. Therefore, there are no more scheduled remaining. Likewise, you can start seeing counters of athletes in individual events, total number of athletes that appear in relay events, the total number of athletes you have across the board, and then finally, the total number of events that are entered, since some athletes obviously can be competing in multiple events. This is really just snapshots of data, and we can dig into those more. But there are three main tabs in Meet Manager that I want to focus on specifically. And those are going to be the tabs that allow you to truly ensure registration is set up and capable of taking place. That is the Setup tab, it is the Divisions tab, and it is the Events tab. The rest of them are data-driven pages, and we will go through each one of those individually. But there will be less settings and functionality you can determine on those, and that is more actually seeing what is coming in and what is taking place. Before I start running through the Setup tab, at this point, do we have any questions about anything we've covered or anything else that this may have triggered for you?
Jeff, there is a question in the chat. It says, for the events, why do we only see entries as boys and girls, not by division?
That is a good question. So in this particular meet for training, I only have a single division set up. In that public entry tab, I think is actually what that question is probably directed at. This public entry, because we limit the data that is made available to the coaches registering, it is actually going to combine the divisions unless you filter otherwise. So you'll be able to see across all divisions the boys listed. Now, that is not how it views for the individual coaches as they're registering. When they are registering, they will be able to clearly see which division they are signing up for and which division each event is specifically tied to. So they will have the opportunity to register the 100-meter dash boys for senior, as well as for junior or grade 8, depending on how many divisions we set up for that particular.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. Can you hear me, Jeffrey?
Yes.
I'm on my phone doing this for the first time. I can't find a put up your hand, so I had no choice but to unmute myself.
Oh,
but this is Stan from Vancouver. Regarding the question that you just answered, I've got my meet set up and partially filled, and when I look at my entries, I can't quite remember which page it is, but it's the one where I see, you know, boys 100-meter, boys 200-meter, girls 100, and so on. I found the exact same thing. It doesn't say what division they are. Like, I see that I have 3 boys in 100 meters, 4 girls in 100 meters, but I actually have to click further to see the division. I'm wondering if that's what the person who asked the previous question is asking about.
I believe so. So on this public page, we're really trying to condense overall page real estate, for lack of a better word, where we are essentially combining those divisions simply as a second level of verification that those entries are in the system. It also helps to eliminate people being able to see specifically which athletes you registered for specific divisions. Now, Stan, I'm assuming you can't see my screen, or maybe you can. But if you actually go into the Meet Manager, there is another entries tab that is actually specifically for meet directors, for timers, for host teams, where they can go in and they are going to be able to see specifically which divisions these athletes are registered for. Again, this meet is set up with a single one. So when you have it filtered to all, it is listing a single, single boys 100-meter, but that would not be the case if we had multiple divisions listed. You would be able to switch back and forth and see the multiple divisions that are there, and specifically how many entries there are for each one, as well as which athletes there are. A similar means of kind of seeing that without going line by line, athlete by athlete, is you can come to the Events tab in Meet Manager, and over here on the right-hand column of the chart, you can see the specific number of athletes registered for that event in this division. So here in this little example, we'll see in the girls 100-meter dash for the senior division, there are 7 total entries. If we had multiple divisions, you would see, since they're listed first and foremost alphabetically by event, you would see the junior girls 100-meter listed directly after it, and you could see how many entries there are for that. You also have the ability to drill into that. And once again, you can see additional settings. You can see the event codes that are set up, as well as which entries and which schools those entries came from. Does that answer the questions? We can continue discussing this if there is more questions or concerns about that.
Sounds like that covers the answer covers it well. Yes.
Okay, perfect. I saw someone ask for the link. Yes, let me add that link. Unfortunately, I don't expect many of you to be able to access this gray Meet Manager button, since this isn't set up and linked specifically to your accounts at this moment. So you can go to the Meet page, but for the time being, I think we're better off just following on my screen. And then we can set up other meets, and I can grant everybody access so you can play around with it. We don't have to test it out with a real meet. We can create some additional meets, or I can individually give you access to this meet so you can go in and play around without any fears of affecting anybody's meet or affecting a meet that you are actively trying to collect registration for. So moving on, so the setup tab, the vast majority of this information, whether you create it yourself or you come through us, will already be entered. And as you can see, it is very basic information. Name of the meet, when the meet starts and when the meet closes, which season this is for, meet venue, host team. This page URL is if you have a dedicated website for the meet that is non-registration related, you can post the link here so folks can link directly to it. You know, for the championship meet, if y'all have a dedicated page with information about it on BCSS's website, we can link to that directly. Otherwise, leaving it blank is perfectly normal and acceptable. Likewise, you see here on the timer information, if we do set up a timer account for any of you or other timers that might not be on this call, this is where you can search for them. Just simply type in and it'll give you a list of options that are available matching that text. And then importantly, you'll see this timer lock. And what this timer lock does is if you are a timer for the meet, and again, we can set this up for meet secretaries and directors as well, this will prevent anybody else from being able to change sensitive data. They wouldn't be able to change registration open and close date. They wouldn't be able to edit the events that are available or the event entry limits. That would just be locked down. So essentially, only people with that timer access or meet director access would actually be able to change anything. Usually by default, when I'm setting these meets up on your behalf, I always go ahead and lock that either for the director or the timer, simply to avoid too many cooks in the kitchen, too many people playing around and accidentally making a change that they potentially didn't mean to. Meet manager point of contact. This information can be the timer's name, the meet director's name. If there's somebody else folks should be reaching out to, it can be their name. You could even put in the registration at MileSplit.com so folks can reach out to us directly if they do drill in and find the point of contact. The key point in here, all these fields are optional. You do not have to add anything here. But if you do want to send Teams invites to the meet, specifically through MileSplit, we just need to have an email address, because that is actually the email those invitations will come through. We found it's a lot more effective if an email invite is coming from the meet director or timer, rather in something recognizable, right? Rather than a generic MileSplit that might get sent to spam or might be overlooked simply because it's assumed to be marketing or something along those lines. Registration access. We have three options here. One, open entry, and as it says, it's public. Anybody can enter. That means it's an open meet. Any team could enter the meet and register athletes. Password protected means that in order to register the meet, if a coach goes to register, the first thing they will be asked is to enter in that password. And the password can be determined here. So you could make the password whatever you may like. So in this case, we could say the password is Jeffrey. You pass that along to your coaches. When they go to register, only those that have received the password will be allowed to enter. The other option, and really our next evolution of password from back in the day, was invite only. And invite only means that we are inviting select schools on MileSplit, and only those teams are permitted to enter the meet. Anybody else will be told they're not allowed to register, and that they'll need to request an invite in order to register. A couple of key points on invitations. And as meet directors and timers, eventually, inevitably, you will come across this. Certain districts, certain schools naturally are gatekeep emails, right? And sometimes those actual email invitations will not arrive to the coaches. If that is the case, it is okay, because any team on the invite list will be permitted to register. They do not actually have to receive the email invite. The email invite makes it easy. It will have the meet name, a link directly to the page. It'll have all the pertinent information about registration, when it opens, when it closes, date of the meet, that very basic information. But if they don't receive it, they can still go directly to the meet. You can share them a link to the meet, and they will be allowed to register. Think of the invite list like a bouncer at a fancy dinner party. If your name is on the list, you'll be allowed in, regardless if you have the actual physical invite in your hand. So again, just to emphasize, if somebody that you have sent an invite to that team and they did not receive it, you can always just send them the link to the meet directly. That URL will be the same for everybody, and they'll be allowed to register. You'll see here, allow B and C teams. If you're going to permit multiple squads from a single school, you can allow this. You can allow them to register 2 teams. They can register 3 teams. Their schools will still be titled the same, but they will be able to be imported separately into your meet management software, whether it's high tech or another one of the softwares, and allow you to score them separately as well. That way you don't have to actually divvy those up on the manually on your end in the meet manager software. By default, it's always set to no, but it is a simple change if you are ever in an occasion where you need to allow that. Jumping down, open and close date, very self-explanatory. When do you want registration to open and when do you want registration to close? You can adjust the times for both open and close dates, obviously, and then the time zone for y'all should automatically populate to Pacific. But if it is set up for a reason and it's not, it can be changed right here, and we'll have the time zones available. Open to and who can enter. These are important. Open to is just what level. For the vast majority of people, high school, middle school are going to be the options you select, elementary. And then who can enter? Is this going to be for schools only? Can club teams enter, and or can unattached or individual athletes register for the meet as well? In most cases, schools are going to be the only ones, but those options are available and can be easily applied as well. You'll see here some max athlete situations. Max attendance. Now, Most of you, I doubt, will ever use this field. We added this specifically during the COVID era, where you had a lot of venues that were actually putting a cap on the number of people that could be there at one time. So, only 250 kids across the whole meet could attend. You could set that here. Otherwise, you'll never have to touch it. 0 in our system in anything permitting or pertaining to entry limits, it means infinity, unlimited. So a 0, if you see that, does not mean it's not going to allow anybody. It will allow as many, an unlimited amount. Max athlete events is total number of events one single athlete can compete in. Let's say there is a maximum of 4 events an athlete can run or participate in. We can set the max at 4, and then we can determine how many field and how many running. So you could say 4 events total, but no more than 3 running or no more than 3 field. And you can adjust that however you need. And likewise, you can choose for those running events to include relay events as well as include relay alternates. So those settings are there for you as well. Entry limits are usually a pretty pressing topic. So I'd like to pause for a second and see if anybody has any questions specifically about anything we've covered thus far or the entry limits that we've gone over. Just going to check okay, it doesn't look like we've had any come in.
I don't know, this might be well, whatever, it's a question. What's a good time to set the deadline on this registration before a meet?
That's a good question. And it is personal preference for everybody involved. By default, say we have an ability to clone a meet. So if this is a meet you ran last year and you're running it again, you can clone it over. That way you don't have to redo all the settings. By default, it automatically sets to 3 days before the meet day. And that's kind of our general rule of thumb that we've learned over the years. 3 days is usually enough time for the timers or the meet directors to get the information, the data downloaded and imported. Now, obviously, that varies a lot. If it's a small dual meet or in an inter squad meet, 3 days might be excessive, and you might close it the day before. I've seen instances where people close it the morning of the meet at like 9 a.m. if the meet is going to be run in the afternoon. 3 days is usually what I'll set it to if I don't know, and then allow the meet director or the timer to adjust that as needed. Large meets, very large meets that are going to include a lot of database setup and performance sheets. If it's cross country and you have to build packets, you can see that close day opening earlier, right? Maybe a week before, maybe 5 days before. I do recommend typically at least 3 days, unless you are very comfortable with downloading the data and importing it and getting that set up. But I do think 3 days is typically a pretty safe approach to take. Good question. Entry visibility, just kind of moving forward. And again, please do not hesitate to just yell out a question. I'm not actually looking at the meeting screen. So I can't see the chat box. Please just go ahead and scream them out. Entry visibility.
Sorry, can I ask a question? There's a question that says, do we select or allow B teams if we have more than one 4x100 team per school?
The 4 relays, you do not need to allow B teams, and we can get to that. You can actually set separate individual entry limits to allow teams to register multiple teams without actually having to register an entire new like B team or C team. So you can have a single team that is allowed to register 2 relay teams or 3 relay teams for each relay event. That very good question. No, you do not need to allow B teams or allow C teams in order to allow teams to register more than a single relay. Entry visibility is what I mentioned earlier, that public-facing entries tab that compiles everybody into one event. You can make it constantly public. You can make it public only after registration has closed. And you have the option to never publicize those and keep those private entirely. This does not impact an individual coach's ability to see their entries. They can still access registration and view each athlete for each division, each event within their registration workflow. This is just strictly pertaining to the ability to see other teams, to see other athletes. Custom subdomain, if you would like to essentially white label our website, if we wanted to do bcss championships.milesplit.com, you could add that here and simply check availability. If the domain exists, it will give you that domain, so you could send people that link with a custom subdomain, and it will take them to the same page. Most people don't use it. If you are ever trying to set it up and it's giving you issues, just reach out to me specifically and I'll get you taken care of. It's a pretty fringe use case, but it is there if you want to or are interested in looking into it.
Jeffrey, is it normal to have entries made public?
That is a very case by case. So here in America, I have some states that their rule is they never make entries public. I have other ones that only want to make entries public for postseason meets after registration closes. I think in a lot of regular season meets, entries are generally left as public because there's a lot less gamesmanship. It's really just an opportunity for the athletes to compete, get times under their belt. By default, we actually have it just checked to yes. But when I'm setting up postseason meets or I'm working in a place where I know they actually have regulations in their rule books to not publicize those, I'll adjust those as needed. So if y'all don't have any rules prohibiting it, I think leaving it public is perfectly acceptable and is very status quo.
Okay, so like if it's a zone meet to go to provincials, you would probably have it public, although I can see a problem with that, maybe having other schools look to see what schools have what athletes
right
in
precisely.
which events, and switching it around to
exactly. And so that's why, and again, like Harp and y'all's team, the BCSS can direct me and make a decision one way or the other, or leave it open-ended. And I'm going to adhere to what y'all actually see as the most fitting. Again, my rule of thumb, for the exact reasons you just stated about kind of being able to look at the athletes and change their entries based on that. That's why I opt to, in the postseason, unless I'm told otherwise, to set it to after registration closes. That way they can see the other entries, but only after they no longer have the ability to go in and change their entries.
Thanks for that, Harp. Because you're from BC School Sports, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with Jeffrey that doing it after registration closes makes the most sense. Once we get into the provincials, obviously all of the athletes are advancing through their zones, so we don't have to worry about gamemanship or people trying to match athletes for different events. So that will all become public once Andrew's got the site all built and stuff. So
yeah, absolutely. Great point, Harp. Yeah, it really is dependent on that first round, right, where they're actively registering athletes. When advancement is taking place, we make those public. That way, specifically athletes and coaches can go in and verify that their entries are in there, simply because people aren't registering individually.
Jeffrey, can I just go back to the maximums? And actually, I thank you for pausing and seeing if we had questions. I just want to confirm that I'm understanding the maximums correctly. So what I'm seeing that you've done is there is no maximum attendance. An athlete can enter up to 4 individual events spread between running and field, but no more than 3 running, no more than 3 field. And actually relays in your case are included as well.
That is exactly correct.
Okay.
In this particular.
Maybe if I could just run through what we're doing, and then you can confirm what I should be entering. So say for our subzone, for our zone, we've got a limit of 3 individual events, 2 relays, and we don't distinguish field or running. So in that case, I would say 3 for the max athlete. Unrestricted for the other.
Right. So if they could do, and you can kind of play around with the max running and field. If they can do 3 events, and it doesn't matter if that is 3 running or 3 field, which correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's what you're.
Correct. Yes.
Right. So you could come in here and say 3 and 3 as well for field and running. The system's going to view it as redundant.
It's the same thing, right?
Exactly, because the max athlete events is going to be the first thing the system checks, first and foremost. Have they not exceeded whatever the max for each individual athlete is? So in this case, you could set it at 3 unrestricted. And I'm sorry, did you say not including relays?
It's 3 individual events, and in addition, up to 2 relays. So in other words, they could be in 5 events. So I'm thinking I would click including relays to no.
Yes. So in this particular case, we would want to, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to think and demonstrate at the same time. So in this particular case, what we would actually want to do to show the system, since individual relays, we don't actually want to count that for individual events. We would set the max athlete events at 5, since technically they could be in 2 relays plus 3 field or 3 running. So in this, we would take that unrestricted out and specify no more than 3 running, no more than 3 field. And then we are not including relays, because that the relay, including relays, wants to count as a running event. So in this particular setup, you see right now, 5 max overall, 3 running, 3 field. They could sign up for 3 running and 3 field plus 2 relays, but they would not be allowed to sign up for more than 3 running or individual running or more than 3 field events.
But that's not what I want, though, because I'm not allowing an athlete to enter 3 running and 2 field events. They can, in our case, there's a limit of 3 individual events.
Oh, I see. Yes.
So I'm thinking it should be the way you had it, and click with 3 and unrestricted, no for including relay events. And then in my relay 4x100, 4x400, I've set up to 2 teams per school.
Right. And the individual athlete could be on 2 of those relays, but also running and competing in 3 other events.
3 other individual events, yes.
Okay. Yes. So max actually, yes, actually, this is what we would want to do.
Right.
We would want to say no more than any individual running event, 3, and then not including relays.
Right.
So here, an athlete can't be in any more than 3 individual events. That could be any combination of 3 field or 3 running. Right. And then but it is not including relays. So they could sign up for additional relays without having it count across their individual.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, great question. And yeah, and again, I don't expect anybody to memorize every second of this. So if you do have entry limit questions, which is obviously a very common and a very pressing matter, again, feel free to reach out to me and we can ensure that your meet is set up correctly but beforehand. Jumping along again, waivers, for the most part, you can leave these off. Individual waivers are only intended if you have unattached athletes. Team waivers, it appears during registration like a terms and conditions. The coach would be signing off on behalf of the entire team. It is not a waiver that each individual athlete would be required to sign, like a participation waiver or a liability waiver. If you do have those much more important type of waivers, I do recommend posting that as in the meet information section so they can download it and pass it out to their athletes. This is more just kind of a catch-all. Again, it was actually a COVID edition where teams had to acknowledge the inherent risk of competing while COVID-19 was a prevalent and severe risk for high school athletics, right? So I imagine most people on this call are not going to interact with waivers. If you do have questions, we can take that offline. Likewise, payment information. We do have the ability to collect online payments. We also have the ability to add pricing information and generate invoices for teams while not activating online payments. So they could just see it and print out invoices to submit to their bookkeepers. If you ever want to dig into that, again, I invite you, let's take that offline. Pricing is obviously a little intricate and can be a little complicated depending on what structure you're going with. So please feel free to reach out to me and we can go into that. And then lastly, registration note, payment instructions aren't really necessary and worthy of discussion right now. Meet information is again where you can post documents with the attached file link. You can upload that document. If you've got like a Google document and a link to it, you can post that link to another website as well. This is what's going to appear on that front page. So when people first come to your meet, they're going to see this information. You can copy and paste it. You can attach, you can format it, whatever you need to do and whatever information you want to make public. And then most importantly, any changes you make, always make sure to scroll to the bottom and hit save changes. Otherwise, it will just revert back to where you were at. So going to the teams, and again, teams tab was one of those ones I indicated is much more data-driven and informational. Here you can see every team that has begun registration. You can verify that they have begun registration by the status over here. If they have been invited or scheduled and they have not actively started registering, it will indicate over here invited, and their name will not have a hyperlink to it. It will just be a text name. So you can very easily discern which teams have accepted it and which haven't. And they are sorted by registration first. So if there were teams here that had not accepted the invitation yet, they would be listed as the bottom, just no hyperlink, and it would say invited over here on the right-hand side. You can also see the total number of entries they have, as well as the ability to click on a team name and view their registration data. You can see who the contact is, who entered and when, and if you have a team that registered for a meet that they were not supposed to, clicking on the team name from the Teams tab is where you can actually remove that team from the meet, and it will remove not only the team, but also any entries they have entered into that meet as well. The last thing I want to just mention real quick on the Teams tab, this contact to CSV, it will download into a spreadsheet for you. Every coach associated with the team that registered for this meet, their contact information will be listed. So it'll have, first and foremost, their email address that they use for MileSplit. And then it will also have a phone number listed for them. So if you do need to get in contact with a particular or a specific coach or team, you can grab that contact information into a spreadsheet by clicking this Contacts to CSV link on the right-hand side. Oh, and I guess the last thing, very important. If you want to send invites to your team, the Teams tab is where you can do it. So in this text box, you can start searching. Let's say I want to invite Charles Hayes. I type in a bit of their name. It will filter out every school that doesn't match, whatever you have typed in. Click on it, and then you can click Add Team. It'll add that team to the schedule. Charles Hayes is actually already in this meet, so it's not the greatest example. But then you could just simply click the checkbox here or highlight all of them and scroll down and hit this Send Invites. And that's what will actually trigger the email invitation that goes out to any coach that has claimed that team. And it is tied specifically to accounts that have claimed the team. And by claim, I mean link their account as an administrator or as a coach. So if they have not created an account and claimed their team, which we should have pretty good turnout on that at this point, they wouldn't actually receive that invite. But if they were to claim the team after the fact, like I mentioned before, since they're already on the list, you wouldn't have to resend them an invite. They'd be able to just go in and start registering for the meet. Do we have any questions on inviting teams? I kind of rushed through that one.
I have one. I just wanted to say that you don't have to use this to invite teams. You can do it the old-fashioned way still.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Of course. Perfect. Athletes tab, again, very informational. Here you just see a list of the athletes. You won't see a breakdown of their event. And then you can see how many athletes or how many entries said athlete has. So you can sort here and see, okay, these athletes have 3 entries, 2, 1, 1, 1. Likewise, if for some reason you wanted to remove an athlete from your meet, you could click on their name. Well, actually, I backtrack. You would remove them from the teams tab. If you had unattached athletes in a meet, you could click on their name and remove just that one athlete. But since these athletes are all tied to a team and registered as a team, you would want to actually click on their team name and go and select that particular athlete to remove. Divisions tab. So this is one of the bread and butter ones. And the way we do divisions and is different from some other services out there is we don't distinguish divisions by gender. You have the option to prevent a specific gender from registering. So if it's boys only, you can prevent females or girls from even registering. But we just have one senior division, and genders will be separated by the events. When you import these into HiTech will read the files and understand exactly what is happening here. So if we set these meets up on your behalf, these divisions likely will already be created. If you are in need of adding one or you're setting up new ones, you can come here and click the New Division tab. We could create a new division. We're saying junior. This is a high school level. Division number here, and it says specifically if you're using HiTech. Do we have anybody using anything other than HiTech on this call? I know Meet Pro is another popular one these days. If not, it's okay, and the same pretty much goes for most of them these days. You'll want to match this number with the number in your meet management software. So if you're setting up a meet in HiTech with multiple divisions, you want to make sure that we've got them aligned accordingly on MileSplit, because this is how HiTech will read the entry download file and know which events to import each division into, or which athletes to import into each division. So if you've got junior listed as 2 and senior listed as 1, it will map those accordingly when you import them into your meet management software. If you leave them both as 0, or they're both 1, or they're both 2, it's going to actually read those in the file as the same division and combine them, even if you have them set up differently. So typically, if you've set up divisions in high tech, you'll have done this in the past, but it is something to keep in mind. And also something that we are here to help assist you with. If you ever download entry files and are importing them and everything is backwards or everything is being combined, reach out to me and I'll get it squared away. It is almost always tied to the division number right here, and we just need to make sure that they're aligned accordingly and everyone is good to go. The who can enter, you can see we could limit it to a specific league. Males, females, schools. Males, females, and schools always by default are checked to yes. Clubs and unattached are checked to no. So if you do want to allow unattached individuals or clubs, you would simply come in here and need to actively say yes. Max entries per team. I want to pause here for a second because this one causes a lot of confusion. This is a very specific setting that we have for a couple of states here on my side of the border, where they cap the number of athletes a team can register across all events in that division. So Wisconsin, for example, they'll allow 3 athletes for every event, but a maximum of 28 entries across the entire gender. So you could set that here. Chances are, and correct me if I'm wrong, I have not been told that y'all have a rule that aligns with that. So there likely will never be a reason why you ever need to put anything here. We will go through, I'll show you here in just 2 seconds, how you actually set entry limits per event, per team. Seating and standards. Very, very important, pretty self-explanatory. Verified only means that the seed time has to live in our database to be pulled in when they're registering. Our database, if it has, a 100 meter for Jeffrey, when my coach goes to register me, it's going to pull in my best time that meets the rest of these requirements. At this point, we do not have a lot of current season or even past season results in for British Columbia at this point, right? So verified only might result in a lot of no times where they can't add a seed time at all. Coach can override, means it's going to import the best time we have in our database, but coaches will have the ability to manually adjust that seed time to whatever they know is the best for that athlete. But they are required to have some sort of a seed time there, even if it's an estimate. Optional means they could manually update it, or they could simply leave it blank. It will also import the best time by default, but it can be changed or it can be left entirely blank. And then hidden means you're not accepting seed times at all. You just don't need the data. You see it a lot more, obviously, in cross country than you do in track and field, where seed times are much more important. But that would just not give folks the option at all. Accept seeds from meet type. You can say any meets. You can say no duels, tries, quads. Qualifying meets only is how we would have like the championship set up. So seed times can only come from those zones, right? And no other seed times, no PRs, no other times from earlier in the year, even if they're better, would be allowed to come in. They also wouldn't be able to edit those seed times to something different because the meet is dependent on a specific time from a specific meet.
Do you have to have a choice on these, or can you just leave them unchosen?
Yeah, you can. So by default, let me run through real quick, is optional, any meet, PR, no and outdoor, or whatever the current season is for the accept seeds from season. So that will pretty much allow coaches to do whatever they want. It'll pull in their athlete's best time that our database has ever in the system. They could adjust it, they could leave it blank, they could leave it in there. That seed can also come from any meet that athlete participated in. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from this year. So you don't actually have to go through these. That is the very standard and basic seed time. It's typically what people leave in for especially early season meets where you're obviously not going to have much current season data. So yeah, to your question, you could stop right here after filling this information, hit save, and coaches are going to be able to register, which is the very basic seed requirements. And that requirement is essentially that they can leave it as is, they can do nothing, or they could update it if they need to, or if they want to. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Wonderful. Required fields down here, first name, last name, grad year are always checked. I recommend do not add any of these other ones for the meets that we're going to be doing. A lot of this other stuff is very, like off-season, club season, AAU, Junior Olympics type data fields. Birthdays is the most common one that also gets added for, typical meets. If birthday is required, simply check this and it will require that we have the birthday on file for that athlete. If an athlete is in our system and doesn't have a birthday, they'll be prompted when they go to register that athlete to list what their birthday was. So it wouldn't be something they'd have to go in and update on their own.
And Jerry, or can I make a comment just on the birth dates? We've had a lot of trouble with that because in BC they compete by grade, and there's always some controversy because we have kids who have birthdays that are later than the norm and also earlier than the norm. So it's best to leave that blank because it creates some significant issues because they don't compete by birth year at all here in high school. It's by grade, strictly grade.
Exactly. And that's how we are here. That's why we leave it unchecked. If you do have an age-based meet where, there is a strict birthday cutoff that they need to be X age by X date to compete in this division, that's where this would come into play. And if you do encounter that and need a little extra instruction, again, I'm your guy. Just let me know, and we can get that set up for you. But almost always, you're going to be much better off, and everything you need will still be there without the birthday checked. And again, by default, it is unchecked, and only first name, last name, and the graduation year is included. And then lastly, we've got more pricing information. Again, if you want to dig into pricing and list that kind of information for one reason or another, please just reach out to me. I handle all of that stuff internally, and I'll get you taken care of and set up. So in this instance, you could come here, simply click Save and Add Events. It'll come to this event wizard that we'll have a bunch of common events listed. You could select, 100-meter hurdles. No boys event for that, but they do have the 110. And you can also see here where you can quickly say entry limits per team. So in this case, teams are allowed to register 3 athletes per gender for this event. So they'd be allowed 3 boys in the 100-meter dash and 3 girls. If you need to update them in bulk, you could simply type it in here and press the buttons. So you could say they're allowed 10, and it will update all those individual events. Likewise, this is where you can determine the number of relay squads a team is permitted. This is if we're setting up new events. I'll show you here in 2 seconds how you edit this if events have already been created. So you can see here that the relays now have a 2 here. These fields, and it depends on your rules and regulations. These boxes are minimum athletes required for a relay. So if you put 4 here, you are saying, I need the names of your 4 relay legs at minimum. And then you could set the maximum to allow for 4 alternates, 2 alternates, so like you're allowed to designate legs specifically and then as well as alternates, so they appear in y'all's entry files. 0 would mean they could register a relay team without actually designating the individual legs of said relay team. Postseasons typically want those names in there. A lot of regular season meets will leave that blank, and they don't really care which athletes are competing. But in cases where we are counting, the 3 individual events plus a maximum of 2 relays, you would want to edit this so that you can actually count the number of events correctly for an athlete. Now you'd be able to see, okay, Jeffrey is signed up for the 100, 200, and 400, but he's also listed as a leg or an alternate for the 4x1. So you get a much more holistic approach to those entry limits. And then you would hit create events. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, if you are running a relay, it's a zone to go to provincials, which happens lots in our zone. We're in the Kootenays. At the end of the day, sometimes a school will allow, they'll just like throw a team together and run a relay. And if they were to qualify, is there a way, how can I put this? Is there a way after registration that you can go back in and put those athletes' names in after?
So we could. That is something I think would be a lot easier done with my help in those situations. That way we can transfer the data accordingly, especially when we're talking about zones and provincials, because that data is important. So if you do have teams that show up and just run a relay without designating any within registration, just involve me on that, and I'll make sure that they're taken care of. That way, when the data is advanced, that is in there. Now, the other option is if advancement is taking place via high tech. Those names, as long as you've added them to the high tech database, would also be included in advancement, and you wouldn't need to interact with them on MileSplit any further. But again, just rope me into those situations, and I'll make sure that we are set up and ready to go.
Okay, will do. I feel like we're going to be chatting a lot in the next little while.
Oh, good. I look forward to it, and I am always more than happy to assist.
Thank you.
So, sorry, did someone else?
Oh, yeah, Jeffrey, I have 2 questions, and actually you're in the right screen for my first question.
Okay.
I noticed that my screen, I have 3 divisions, grade 8, junior, senior, and they're all yeses, just like yours are, and I don't remember doing that. So just now I went to edit my grade 8s to set clubs and unattached to no and save, but it won't stick. It stays with yes.
That is a good catch. So we are actually working on that. That is a bug that we just discovered at the tail end of last week. For the time being, these settings on the setup tab, the who can enter, they trump the division settings. So as long as you say no clubs here, no unattached, for the time being, no club or unattached will be able to sign up for that division. That should be fixed by the end of this week, though, where it will reflect properly. But again, yes, as long as they are not allowed on the setup tab, these settings actually will just be superseded, and they won't. No club or unattached is going to be able to actually sign up for it.
Second question, a quick one, I think. If a runner is listed as an alternate on a relay, that counts as one of the relays, correct?
if you have the option to include it or not. So if you can see
I see.
you're including relays, you can also say to include alternates, or you could leave it at no. So an athlete could technically be signed up for 6 events, but they're actually an alternate on 3 relays or 2 relays, or an alternate on 1. And that again will just need to be tailored based on the specific rules. Do y'all count alternates or as overall the 5 event, including relays, or not?
Right. Okay. That's good. Thank you.
Perfect. And then real quick, I showed you how to like set up the events and the entry limits if you're creating a new division. But a lot of times these divisions are already going to accept and exist, and you simply need to update those entry limits. Here, where you see the divisions that are created, over here in this Edit Event tab, you can simply click on here, and this allows you to set the entry limits again for all events and update them. So we could come real quickly and say 2 for all relay. We could say 4 for individuals, and then you can update, minimum relay teams or minimum relay athletes required, if any, as well as how many alternates teams are allowed to sign up as well. And then you'll simply come down and click save. Also, if you have different rules where they're allowed 4 individual entries in individual running, but only 3 in the high jump, you could specify it event by event. They don't all need to be the same, all or nothing. Each event could have its own dedicated entry limit. And then lastly, the events tab, this is where you can go to verify, okay, what events do I have set up for each division? And then how many entries currently have folks signed up for? And then a couple of last points. I know we're running short on time here, so I want to touch on 2 more things really quickly. One, when you are ready to download your entries, you have 2 ways of getting there. 1, you can click on this entries tab right here, or 2, the download entries button right under the logo. You can click on that. They're both going to take you to the exact same place. You'll come to this entry tabs. You'll see here you can update seeds. This means if an athlete was registered and then they participated in a meet, let's say tomorrow, and achieved a better time, you could update the seeds before you download the entries, and any athlete that now has a better seed time in our system, of course, still adhering to the seed requirements that you designated, it will now grab that new seed time, preventing the coaches from having to go back in and actually manually update that. So in instances where registration is open well in advance, they might register early. They don't have to keep going back every time their kid has achieved a better time. You could simply, as the meet director, come and update these seeds, and it will update any seed in our database. More importantly is actually downloading the entries so you can import them into high tech. You're going to see a lot of different formats here, and you're going to see 3 different high tech. The standard one, and the one that almost everybody is only ever going to need, is the top option, download to high tech. You'll click on that, and then you're going to have 2 options, athletes only or athletes and entries. For track and field, you are always going to grab the athletes and entries, and quite frankly, for cross country, you probably will too. I do see some cross country meets where they're only running the 5K, right? Or the 1600, whatever it may be, 32, and they just want the athlete names. You're going to come here and select the athletes and entries, and it will just automatically download it. It's in a semicolon delimited format. It's exactly what high tech, as well as a lot of the other leading ones like Me Pro, are formatted in. So it is exactly in the language that high tech needs in order to be able to read it and import that database into your meet management tool. And then the last thing I want to mention is just this nifty feature, this send mass email button. This allows you to communicate with any coach that has been invited and or has registered for the meet. You can tailor it specifically to invited teams. You can send it to everybody that's invited and registered. All teams will just be registration. All individuals is only applicable if you have unattached athletes. It's not going to reach out to the individual athletes on each team since they are registered by the coach. You can also tailor it if a team has injured but never entered any of their athletes. You can send all those teams emails simultaneously. By default, it's going to use your MileSplit account email as the from address. You can change that if needed. And then likewise, you've got just an email text box where you can tailor the messaging specifically what it wants. You'll notice here, there's a couple of these like code type items. This will, if you leave those, it will automatically populate the relevant information. So this will say, if you sent it out to me and 5 other people, it will say each of our names individually, each person that the email is going to. Likewise, it will send me a direct link to my registration session rather than just a link to the meet page. So pretty nifty little features that just kind of look a little funky when you're looking at them, but you don't actually have to change anything there. So that is all in all the entirety of it, and that is a lot of information, and two, took a bit of time. So does anybody have any questions, any concerns? We don't have to keep it limited specifically to what you've seen right now. If you have other questions, we can knock those out as well. I want to give you all a chance to bring anything and everything up.
I got one, Jeffrey, around updating seeds. One of the problems we've had with our provincial championship is we get a lot of parents, especially, wanting to go and update their student athletes' seeds because they'll say, hey, at the zone meet, they didn't perform as well as they did at such and such a meet, and we want to change it to the best possible seed time. But what we do at our provincial championship is we keep the zone seeds. The only seeds that we allow in are the ones that what we call open zone for athletes that are, weren't able to make it through. So is there a way of kind of, I'm assuming that we can limit those changes, correct?
Sorry, can you explain it again for me? So you will accept the seed times from zones for any athlete that qualified, but then there are athletes that potentially wouldn't have times from those seeds?
So we, any of the athletes that automatically qualify from the zone championships, we keep their performances from the zone championships. They're not permitted to update their seeds.
Right.
But we also have a process we call the open zone process, where 2 athletes in our junior and our senior category with the best performances that are non-automatic, non-auto qualifiers can get into the championship. So those 2 individuals, and sometimes there's more, we take their best performance from the season, but they haven't been able to automatically qualify. They're going through a side route.
I see. Yes. So we do have the ability to update individual seeds after the fact without updating everybody. And especially if we have the requirement set to only accept seeds from those qualifying meets, by default, everybody's time is going to pull in from the zone meet. But you could come here and say Chase was one of those athletes, and we need to update that seed time to a better time. We could click as the meet director that, and sorry, I kind of jumped into it, this edit button right here, and we could come in, and here we have the ability to automatically update a seed time. So we could say, 11:00, and we could say it's entered and approved, and now we save that change, and you will be on the list. You can see here. So the seed time doesn't have a hyperlink because it didn't exist in our database. And it's a little hard to visualize here because none of these actually have seed times. But if it was a verified and a qualifying seed, it would actually have a link where you could click on that seed time and it will take you to the meet that they achieved it at. So it will be a hyperlink, and that means it is verified, it exists in our database. If they manually enter it in, if you do it and approve it, it will have a checkbox. But if they manually enter it in during registration, let me backtrack a little bit, and then we could come in here. They manually enter a seed time. Wow, it's stuck because I had already accepted that kid. But anyways, you'll see a red UN, meaning unverified. So if we allow people to manually update their seeds, you can see which ones were manually updated by the indicator of a red UN next to the seed time in place of the check. And then you could go in and verify that yourself by clicking that entered and approved time. That's not necessarily necessary. You can accept unverified times will still exist in your entry file download. So you can still download those without going through and verifying each individual one if you just take their word for it, right? Does that answer the question in this situation?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful.
Somewhat.
Do we have any other questions?
Jeff, there was a question earlier about if the timers were planning to digitally advance their qualifiers to the next meet. So, for example, from a league meet to the zone and then to the provincials, once the coaches have entered their athletes into their specific events, they don't need to do anything else, right?
Correct. Yes. So advancing to the next round, coaches will not be required to register their athletes again. Any of their qualifiers will automatically be advanced. And we have the ability to do that advancement within MileSplit itself, this import feature right here. Now, this import feature is something that I handle internally, and I would be advancing those meets for you. Now, if you want to advance your league meets via your meet management software where you get the advancer, the qualifier file or the advancer file, that is still fully a possibility. And when you upload those results, all of those athletes will still be in the system and will still be able to advance them on MileSplit from zone to provincial. So you could do it the whole way, or you could do it, one step of the way, which is a little bit of a loaded answer. Harp, I know you and I were still kind of discussing if we were going to have it done the way y'all have done it in the past for this first season through high tech, or if we wanted to go ahead and move forward with the MileSplit auto advancement. Either way is perfectly fine, and we obviously have that capability. It's just something in this first season. It will go a lot more smoothly if y'all just allow me to do the advancement if we do opt to do it via MileSplit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. I think there might be the odd zone that, they've got experienced timers that will probably want to do it themselves.
Yeah,
so I think if we have the ability to do both, advance for them as well as them advancing directly to Andrew, who will do the entries for the provincials.
Yeah, exactly. And we do. So it doesn't need to be all or one. We can do advancement on MileSplit for anybody that needs it or anybody that would like to just offload that off their plate, as well as still accommodate it and import it if the advancement is done like via high tech, like it's been done in the past. So that's not an issue at all.
Jeffrey, what does advancement look like? We got a few meet directors here on the call. What does that generally look like from their end?
Well, so on MileSplit itself, it is Pretty much, although it is public facing here, it requires access to our database, because if a performance in there needs to be updated or it didn't get processed correctly into the database, you're actually going to hit some stop gaps in which you're not going to be able to do it yourself. That's why if there are meet directors that do want to handle it, I do recommend continuing to just grab those advancer files from High Tech itself. What it looks like on my end is I would add any qualifier meets here, which would be the earlier round. And then I go through it, and it's a very basic and kind of straightforward process where I determine, okay, top 4 athletes from every event advance to the next round. And I'm selecting, and this will be girls senior division. And so we'll advance each division one by one, and then next gender and advance those divisions one by one. And it will automatically import those entries. It's difficult to demonstrate because it does require a lot of registration data as well as performances existing. So on this call, it wouldn't be something that I can actually just whip up a demo and show you really quickly. But I do think, and this goes for anyone on the call, and Harp, we can coordinate this. I do think if we want to dive into auto advancement so y'all can make the decision on whether, like how you want to do it, we can have another little webinar demonstration where I can actually show y'all the ins and outs of auto advancement. It's a much more time consuming one to set up and actually demonstrate live in action. And I think that would be better suited for another phone call.
Can I ask you another question, Jeffrey? This is at our championship, we allow 2 scoring athletes, but unlimited athletes per school per event. Mm-hmm. There are the limitations to accommodate that. Is that correct? On the MileSplit meet manager?
Yes. And I'm sorry. So you say that again. You allow unlimited entries per event.
Per school. So per school could have, for example, 5 athletes in the senior boys 110-meter hurdles, but only 2 will score.
Oh, yes. Okay. Sure. So as far as registration goes, that is absolutely possible. You could come in here and set zeros for everything, and that will allow unlimited entries in each one. The scoring itself, to only score the 2, you would still designate that within your meet management software. So High Tech to only grab X numbers. Since the scoring isn't actually being done on the registration platform, you have the full ability to allow unlimited entries and then still score it exactly how you want to. So if you score 2 or you score, 20, you could still set that up and designate it.
Thanks.
And then the last thing, unless anybody's got any more questions, I just want to pass you along the information of submitting the results. I'm going to share some links here in a bit on downloading results in the format that is most compatible with our website for when you want to submit them. But in essence, for this inaugural season, if you send the results to me as well as results@milesplit.com, our team will get those results added and processed, typically within 12 hours. But if you include me on it, since I am your account manager, those will be in basically right away. So this just gives us a lot of eyeballs on it. I've got a team of stats people processing those results, as well as allowing me the visibility to either do it myself or delegate it. So results@milesplit.com, and then myself as well. You can CC me or just do it the normal way. And then we'll add those, and that is true for any meet, even if it has already taken place, and even if it does not have, or it was not set up for registration on MileSplit. regardless if you use our site for registration or not, we want to build out our database with as many results and performances for your athletes that took place as possible. That way, those come in as seed times when you are registering for meets in the future. So, if it is a meet from several weeks ago, that is still perfectly fine. You can submit those results as long as we know the name of the meet, and the date of the meet. We'll be able to add those and get them into our database. So please feel free to submit those results retroactively, as well as when we are doing meets in the future, you can submit results that way.
Anybody else have any questions? Awesome. Well, Jeffrey, thank you very much. That was very informative. Really appreciate it. So yeah, if anybody does have any questions, please feel free to email Jeffrey, or you can email me, and I can connect directly with Jeffrey and try to answer any questions you may have. And hopefully, yeah, we can get some meets set up and get organized. Appreciate that.
Can I just ask one last question?
Absolutely, Andrew.
So this is just trying to just wrap my head around it, where so this is specifically the alternate kind of entry process to our championships that's not auto qualifying. What we've done in the past, we've set up on the other database, Tracky, we've set up kind of events where people will enter, our coaches will enter their athletes or relay teams, and we'll go in and we'll retrieve 2 per event at the senior level or the junior level. Sometimes we have to get more because some zones don't send full contingent of athletes or relays. I'm just kind of wondering what that looks like, who's setting it up. Like, is it me as the meet director? Do you guys do that, or?
So that is a good question. And this is the situation I was kind of hitting on, where I would set that up and I would actually run it. That way I can just ensure everything goes smoothly and goes exactly how you need it. So for those meets where we are advancing, especially ones that are going to have slightly different criteria, right? Where it might be, as you mentioned, 2, but some might also advance more than 2. Like those kind of qualifying standards or those kind of qualifying criteria, if they're just shared with me, I can actually advance all of those entries to the next round entirely on your behalf. I just need to know, which meets are advancing to which which next round, and then what that advancing criteria is.
So just another question, because we got Don Driver, who's the competition secretary, on this call as well, is when it gets downloaded, then all of the data will just be downloaded as one file, not like typically we've had to do multiple files before. So will it be all one file when it's all done online then for download into high tech?
Correct. Yes. For that particular meet, right? So if we were doing a league, advancing a bunch of leagues into a bunch of different zones, each of those respective zone meets would have their own entry file. But if we're doing zones into the championships, and there's just that one championship file, it would be one single file for the different levels as well.
Yeah, what we've previously done is we've just used high tech and we've used the advancers function, but we've had to do multiple files because we do, for example, the Sea to Sky zone, then we do the Eastern Valley zone, then we do the, the Kootenay zone, or whatever the zones. And so I just wanted to check it's just one download when all is said and done, right?
Correct. Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, why don't we call it a night? I appreciate it. Jeffrey's 2 hours ahead of us, so it's almost 9 o'clock there. So, and then we've got some people that are from the Kootenays, and they're an hour ahead as well. Again, thank you everyone for taking 2 hours out of your day. Appreciate that. And again, if anybody has any questions, please forward those off to Jeffrey or myself, and would be happy to jump on that.
Okay, well, again, everybody, thank you very much. It was nice to meet y'all, and we will be talking again soon.
Okay, take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.